Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking perhaps the shortest possible route into what you might call the command center of your hormonal life,
Right.
the hypothalamus pituitary axis.
That's right.
Our sources today, they're really packed with some dense anatomy,
Yeah.
histology, detailing this tiny, tiny structure, think
Yeah.
maybe the size of a flattened grape.
Or a pea, yeah. And it controls just about everything. Growth, stress, metabolism, reproduction, you name it.
So it's the definition of a control room then.
Pretty much. We're diving deep into the pituitary gland itself, the hypophysis, and crucially, its boss, the hypothalamus.
Right.
And our mission today isn't just to describe this circuit, list the parts. It's to get at the core idea. The pituitary isn't really the master gland, people call it.
Okay. How so?
Well, it's more like a very sophisticated relay station. It doesn't really initiate things on its own.
Yeah.
It executes commands it receives, and it gets those commands through two fundamentally different pathways.
Oh, okay.
And those differences, well, they explain both its incredible power and actually some of its biggest vulnerabilities.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the size, you said pea-sized, maybe 500 to 900 milligrams. It's tiny.
It is astonishingly small for what it does.
So before we jump into how it works, let's just pin down where it is. It's suspended from the hypothalamus by that stalk.
The infundibular stalk or pituitary stalk, yeah.
And it sits in this little bony pocket, right?
Yeah.
Called the sella turcica.
Exactly. It's a depression in the sphenoid bone right at the base of the skull. Very protected.
And that location, tucked away in the sella turcica, that dictates a lot clinically, doesn't it?
It dictates everything, clinically speaking. What's immediately striking is how close it is to the optic nerves and the optic chiasm, where the nerves cross.
Right above it, almost.
Yeah, the superior part of the gland is practically touching them.
Okay, so that's where it gets really relevant for, real-world problems. If you get a pituitary tumor or some kind of lesion.
Then the first sign might not even be hormonal. It could easily be blurry vision or loss of peripheral vision.
Because the tumor is physically pressing on those optic nerves.
Absolutely. It's a direct mechanical effect. But conversely, that location is also a bit of a gift for surgeons.
How's that?
Well, it sits directly above the sphenoid air sinus, those air pockets behind your nose. So surgeons can often reach the pituitary through the nose and sinus, the transsphenoidal approach, without having to go through the main part of the brain. It's relatively direct access.
Wow. Okay, so it's this tiny, powerful thing tucked away, but also really connected, anatomically speaking.
Protected and connected, definitely. But as you hinted, maybe a bit confusing structurally.
Yeah, let's get into that structure because the really, the mind-blowing part is its dual origin story. It's like two completely different tissues decided to move in together.
That's it exactly. That dual origin explained almost everything about how it functions and how it's controlled later on. The two main lobes have totally separate embryonic histories.
Okay, let's break that down. Start with the front part, the anterior pituitary. It's the bigger, more glandular-looking bit, sometimes called the adenohypophysis.
Right. And this part, well, it actually starts out in a pretty mundane place. It begins as the Rathke pouch.
Rathke pouch.
What's that?
It's basically an upward bulge, an outpocketing of the ectoderm, lining the roof of the developing mouth or pharynx, very early on, around week 6 of gestation.
So part of your pituitary started as the roof of your mouth.
Essentially, yes. That little pocket pinches off from the mouth lining and migrates upwards towards the developing brain. It then grows and differentiates into the glandular cells of the anterior lobe, purely epithelial tissue.
Okay, that's wild. And while that's happening, the posterior pituitary is forming completely differently.
Completely differently. It starts as the infundibular process, which is a downward growth directly from the neural ectoderm of the brain floor. It's basically brain tissue extending downwards.
And it stays connected to the brain.
It keeps that direct neural connection.
Yes, that's the key.
It becomes the posterior lobe or neurohypophysis. So you end up with this single gland where one part is fundamentally mouth-derived glandular tissue and the other part is brain-derived neural tissue fused together.
Exactly. And you can literally see that difference under a microscope. The anterior glandular part stains darker because the cells are packed so densely. The posterior neural part looks lighter, more fibrous.
Fascinating. And quickly, before we move on, there's that little bit left over from the mouth pouch, right? The pars intermedia.
Yes, the intermediate lobe. It's tiny in adult humans, less than 2% of the gland. But it's derived from that Rathke pouch, too.
And what do the cells there do?
They're quite specialized. They produce things like melanocyte-stimulating hormone, MSH, and also a very interesting molecule. the opiate peptide beta-endorphin.
An opiate peptide originating from tissue that started in the mouth. The body is truly weird.
It really is. That developmental history is everything.
Okay, so now we know the two halves have completely different origins. Let's talk about control. How does the hypothalamus manage these two very different tissues? Because you said it uses two opposite strategies.
That's right. One strategy involves a very precise blood delivery system, sort of slow messaging. The other is like a direct instantaneous phone line using nerves.
Let's start with the glandular part, the anterior lobe. You said slow, precise blood system.
Correct. The anterior lobe isn't directly wired to the hypothalamus with nerves telling it what to do. Instead, it's controlled indirectly via this very specialized blood supply called the hypophyseal portal system. Think of it as a dedicated vascular highway.
A portal system. So the hypothalamus releases hormones into this special blood system, not the general circulation.
Exactly.
Why the detour? Why not just dump releasing hormones into the main bloodstream? Seems inefficient.
But it's about speed and concentration. These hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones are incredibly potent, but they're released in tiny amounts if they went into the general circulation first.
I get diluted.
Take too long to get there.
Precisely. They'd be diluted, broken down, and the signal wouldn't be strong or fast enough. This portal system is a bypass.
Okay, so how does it work? Trace the blood flow for us. Sure. Arteries, the superior hypophyseal arteries, first break into a capillary bed high up in the median eminence of the hypothalamus. This is the primary capillary plexus.
Right.
Here, specific neurons in the hypothalamus secrete their releasing or inhibiting hormones directly into these capillaries.
Okay, hormones loaded, then what?
Then, instead of draining into a regular vein, this hormone-rich blood flows down through special venules, the hypophyseal portal venules, which run along the pituitary stalk.
Demo style.
And these venules then open into another capillary bed, the secondary plexus, which is spread throughout the anterior pituitary lobe itself.
So the commands get delivered directly to the target cells.
Directly, quickly, and in high concentration. This tells the different cell types in the anterior pituitary exactly which of their 6 major tropic hormones, like TSH, ACTH, TH, etc., to release or stop releasing into the general bloodstream.
That makes perfect sense. A dedicated high-speed information lane using blood instead of wires.
Mm-hmm.
And our sources mention something else interesting here, retrograde flow, blood flowing back up.
Yes, that's a fascinating detail. There's evidence for some blood flowing backwards from the pituitary up towards the hypothalamus within this system.
What's the point of that?
It likely provides rapid feedback. The hypothalamus isn't just blindly sending orders. It might be immediately sampling the hormonal environment right at the pituitary, maybe even sensing the pituitary's own output, allowing for instant adjustments. It's two-way communication.
Constant fine-tuning. Okay, now let's contrast that intricate vascular dance with the posterior lobe, the neural half. You call this the direct neural line.
That's right. It's much more straightforward, in a way. The posterior lobe doesn't need a portal system for commands because it is essentially brain tissue. It's made up largely of unmyelinated axons.
Axons originating where?
Originating directly from neuron cell bodies located up in the hypothalamus, specifically in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. These axons run down the pituitary stalk in a bundle called the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract and end in the posterior pituitary.
So the posterior lobe doesn't actually make hormones itself.
Correct. It's more of a storage and release site. The hormones it releases ADH, antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin, and oxytocin, are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus, in those nuclei we just mentioned.
ADH mostly in the supraoptic nucleus, oxytocin mostly in the paraventricular.
Generally speaking, yes. Then these hormones travel down the axons, packaged up with carrier proteins called neurophysions.
And they just wait at the end of the line.
They wait in these specialized structures visible in histology, the herring bodies. These are like little swellings, dilated areas near the axon terminals.
Ah, the storage depots you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. They're aggregates of the hormone granules, stockpiled right next to the capillaries in the posterior lobe, ready for release.
And release happens how?
When a nerve impulse travels down from the hypothalamus, it triggers exocytosis. The granules fuse with the axon membrane and release the hormone directly into the nearby fenestrated capillaries and boom, into the bloodstream.
Instantaneous deployment. Much faster than the portal system for the anterior lobe.
Much faster. It has to be, for the functions these hormones control.
Right, let's talk function. What's the so what of this direct neural output? ADH and oxytocin.
Well, they're critical for rapid physiological adjustments. ADH primarily controls water reabsorption in the kidneys, helping manage hydration and blood pressure. It can also constrict blood vessels at high concentrations.
Hence the name vasopressin.
Exactly. And oxytocin is famous for stimulating uterine contractions during labor and delivery, and also for the milk ejection reflex during breastfeeding. But it does other things too, related to social bonding.
So the hypothalamus is getting info from the nervous system. Maybe blood salt levels are high, or maybe it's time for birth. And it can use this direct line to trigger an immediate, powerful hormonal response via the posterior pituitary.
Precisely. It coordinates the body's internal state and environmental cues with these major endocrine outputs. It's the central integrator.
Okay, so we've built this picture. A complex control center, half mouth, half brain, run by two totally different systems, vascular and neural. Given this complexity, it feels like things could easily go wrong.
And they certainly can. When this axis malfunctions, the effects are usually widespread and serious, not subtle.
What are some key failure points our sources highlight?
Well, going back to the location, its position in the cella turcica makes it susceptible to tumors pituitary adenomas. These account for maybe 10–15% of all tumors inside the skull.
Are they usually cancerous?
Typically benign, thankfully. But the problem is they are often secretory. They churn out massive amounts of one specific pituitary hormone, completely disrupting the body's balance.
Can you give us an example? A dramatic one?
Absolutely. Take an adenoma that overproduces growth hormone, GH. If this happens in childhood, it causes gigantism. If it happens in adulthood, after the growth plates have closed.
That leads to acromegaly, right?
Yes, acromegaly, which literally means enlargement of the extremities. Patients develop distinctive features, enlarged hands and feet, thickening of facial bones, jaw protrusion.
But it's not just cosmetic, is it?
Not at all. Internally, organs enlarge, that's visceromegaly, and it puts immense strain on the cardiovascular system. Untreated acromegaly significantly shortens lifespan, mainly due to heart disease.
A truly systemic disease from one malfunctioning group of cells. What's another example?
Another classic is Cushing disease. This is specifically caused by a pituitary adenoma secreting too much ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone,
And ACTH tells the adrenal glands.
to pump out cortisol, the stress hormone. So excess ACTH leads to chronic overproduction of cortisol by the adrenals, causing a whole constellation of symptoms. Weight gain, muscle weakness, high blood pressure, mood changes, thin skin.
Again, devastating systemic effects.
Absolutely. But maybe the most poignant example of pituitary vulnerability relates directly back to that anterior lobe anatomy and its blood supply. It's called Sheehan syndrome.
Sheehan syndrome, or postpartum hypopituitarism. This affects women after childbirth.
Yes, specifically women who suffer severe blood loss, a major hemorrhage, during or immediately after delivery.
And how does that connect to the pituitary structure?
Remember how the anterior pituitary relies on that portal blood system? Well, during pregnancy, the hormone-producing cells in the anterior lobe multiply significantly. The gland can nearly double in size to meet the demands of pregnancy and lactation.
Okay, it gets bigger.
But here's the critical flaw. Its blood supply doesn't increase proportionally. The existing portal system just gets stretched thinner, supporting a much larger metabolically active tissue.
So it's living right on the edge, metabolically speaking.
Exactly. It becomes extremely vulnerable to any drop in blood pressure or oxygen in what we call ischemia or anoxia.
And a massive postpartum hemorrhage causes exactly that, a sudden, severe drop in blood pressure.
Right. If the blood loss is severe enough, the enlarged, vulnerable anterior pituitary tissue doesn't get enough oxygen and undergoes ischemic necrosis. Large parts of it can literally die off.
Oh, wow. The tissue just infarcts.
Essentially, yes, it burns out. And since the anterior pituitary produces so many critical hormones,
The symptoms would reflect that total collapse.
precisely, the woman may fail to lactate agalactorrhea, her periods stop amenorrhea, she might develop symptoms of hypothyroidism, adrenal insufficiency, leading to low blood pressure, extreme fatigue. It's a catastrophic failure of the gland.
What a devastating consequence tied directly to the gland's unique physiology during pregnancy. It really highlights how that vascular system, while efficient, is also a potential weak point.
It really does. The system's design for precise control also creates this specific vulnerability under extreme physiological stress. The strength becomes an Achilles heel.
So let's try to summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive for you, the listener. We've explored the HPA axis, this tiny command center.
And found its immense power really stems from its peculiar dual origin, one part from the developing mouth, the other directly from the brain.
Yeah, that split personality is key.
And because of that, the two lobes are managed completely differently by the hypothalamus. The anterior glandular lobe needs that special hypophyseal portal system, the blood highway, for its instructions.
While the posterior neural lobe gets its orders instantly via direct nerve tracts, using those herring bodies as ready-to-go supply depots.
Right. And despite being pea-sized, this axis orchestrates growth, metabolism, stress responses, fluid balance, reproduction, basically life's critical functions.
It's a tiny controller managing a vast empire using two completely separate logistical strategies, which is just amazing.
And thinking about that control, we mentioned earlier how the hypothalamus receives all sorts of input from the central nervous system, things like electrolyte levels, hormone levels circulating in the blood, and it controls the autonomic nervous system too. Meanwhile, the pituitary is running the endocrine show downstream.
Which leads to a really interesting final thought for you to ponder. We know there's feedback, including that physical retrograde blood flow potentially going from the pituitary back to the hypothalamus. So how much do those peripheral hormones that the pituitary commands, hormones like cortisol from the adrenals or thyroid hormone, how much do they feed back up and influence the high-level processing, the decision-making, even the autonomic settings within the hypothalamus itself?
It implies a constantly adapting closed-loop system, doesn't it?
Yeah. Could the stress hormones your pituitary released hours ago actually be subtly changing how your hypothalamus perceives the world or makes decisions now? It makes you think about how deeply interconnected our physiology and maybe even our mental state really are, all orchestrated by this tiny axis.